My name is Aurora Hale. I am 36 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is something I never thought I would survive. For most of my life, people saw me as the elegant, untouchable wife of a powerful man, someone who had everything: status, security, and respect, but behind closed doors what I lived through was nothing short of a nightmare. A betrayal so venomous that it tore apart every piece of my sanity. You see, when you marry a man who thrives on control and appearances, you never imagine that the one thing that will destroy you is not an outsider, but the very foundation you trust in most: your marriage. Your husband and the hidden monster lurking inside the walls of your perfect home. I thought I knew him, thought I understood the games of power he played in the office, but the day I discovered the secret he had been hiding, I realized I was living in a mansion built on rot. If you really want to know how it all happened, then stay with me till the very end, because my story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and remember, this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. It started on a cold autumn evening, the kind where the wind rattled against the glass windows of our penthouse, and I was waiting for my husband Victor Hale to return from yet another one of his late-night business meetings. I had grown used to the lies, the perfume on his collar, the excuses that didn't add up, but something about that night felt heavier, more suffocating. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the long dining table built for 12, and stared at the empty seat across from me, the one that had been vacant for months in every way that mattered. When he finally walked in, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled, his eyes darting as if he'd just come from someplace he didn't want me to know, I asked him calmly, "Where were you?" His pause was long, too long, and the silence in that room screamed louder than any argument we could have had. He muttered something about closing a deal, his voice low, rushed, but I saw the faint smear of lipstick on his cuff, a shade I had never worn in my life. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. Instead, I watched, listened, and let the suspicion burn quietly in my chest, fueling me. Over the next few weeks, I became someone else, someone Victor would never suspect, an observer, a ghost in my own home, following his patterns, memorizing his phone calls, even bribing the driver he trusted to take him around the city. The truth began to unravel slowly, but what I uncovered was far more dangerous than infidelity. It wasn't just another woman, it was a web of deceit involving the very company he ran, deals signed in the dark, and a secret partner whose name kept surfacing, someone I knew too well. The whispers led me to a townhouse on the other side of the city, and when I followed him one rain-soaked night, heart pounding as my heels clicked against the pavement, I saw him walk inside, greeted not by a mistress, but by someone whose presence froze me to my core. Standing in the doorway was Cassandra, his assistant, yes, but also the woman who had once been my closest confidant, a friend I had trusted like a sister, a friend I had welcomed into our home. And the way she touched his arm, the way he leaned into her, told me everything. My knees buckled, but I swallowed the scream clawing at my throat, retreating into the shadows before either of them could see me. Rage consumed me, but not just at the affair, because as I listened, as I pieced together their hushed conversation through the thin crack of the window, I realized this wasn't about love or lust. It was about power, money, and the plan to remove me from the picture completely. They spoke of me as if I were an obstacle, something to be dealt with, eliminated, erased. Cassandra's voice was like ice as she said, "She won't fight back, Victor, she's too fragile," and his reply, low, chilling, was, "Then it'll be easier than I thought." My blood turned to fire, my pulse hammering in my ears, because in that moment, I understood. My husband and my best friend were not only betraying me, they were planning something far worse. I stumbled back into the night rain, soaking my hair and clothes, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts, but one truth solidified inside me. I could not confront them yet, not until I knew how deep their conspiracy went. From that night on, every step I took was careful, calculated, hidden. I smiled when Victor looked at me, pretended ignorance when Cassandra sent me her fake saccharine text, but inside, I was mapping their downfall. The walls of our perfect home became my prison, but also my laboratory of revenge. I began keeping a journal, documenting every lie, every inconsistency, every whispered phone call that drifted through the closed study doors. But as I prepared my plan, I started to notice strange things happening in the house doors. I was sure I had locked, standing open, items disappearing and reappearing in places I never put them, shadows in the corners of my vision that vanished when I turned my head. At first I thought it was paranoia, my mind collapsing under the weight of betrayal, but one night while lying awake in the dark, I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door, slow, deliberate, dragging across the floorboards. Victor was out of town, or at least that's what he had told me, and when I whispered his name, no answer came. The footsteps stopped, and then the door handle began to turn. My chest seized, and I clutched the knife I had hidden beneath my pillow weeks ago, ready for whatever horror waited on the other side. The door creaked open slowly, the metallic click of the knob echoing in the silence of the room, and as I gripped the knife tighter, my breath caught in my throat, waiting for the figure to step inside. But when the sliver of hallway light spilled across the floor, there was no one there, just the empty corridor stretching into darkness as though the footsteps had evaporated into thin air. I rose cautiously, my body trembling as I moved to the doorway, scanning every inch of the hall, but the air was still heavy, unnatural, and that was the first night I realized I was not just dealing with betrayal, but with a game that blurred the line between reality and madness, because when I checked the security cameras the next morning, the footage of the hour between midnight and 2 was missing, erased as though someone had deliberately cut out the exact window of time when the footsteps had occurred. My suspicion sharpened into terror when later that day Cassandra called me out of nowhere, her tone overly sweet, asking if I had slept well. The words sent a chill racing down my spine, because how could she have known about my restless night unless Victor had told her, or worse, unless she had been the one standing outside my door? I answered her with feigned cheerfulness, my voice steady despite the storm churning inside me, and I realized in that moment that they were not just betraying me. They were testing me, pushing me toward a breakdown that would make it easy to label me as unstable, unfit, disposable. The following week, Victor announced we were hosting a small dinner party at the penthouse, a handful of his closest colleagues and their spouses, and of course, Cassandra would be attending under the guise of his indispensable assistant. I agreed with a smile, but beneath the surface I was boiling, because I knew what they were doing. They wanted me to crack in front of witnesses, to show signs of hysteria, so they could paint me as the problem, the liability, that evening dressed in crimson silk with my hair pinned in perfect waves. I played the role of the doting wife, flawlessly serving wine, laughing at empty jokes, all the while watching Cassandra cling a little too close to Victor's side, her hand brushing against his arm like she owned him, like she wanted me to see the replacement already lined up. As the night drew on, I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of fetching dessert, but instead I slipped into Victor's study, where his leather briefcase sat beside the desk. With trembling hands, I unlocked the hidden compartment I had discovered weeks ago, and inside, I found documents, contracts, bank transfers, and most chilling of all, a draft of divorce papers with my name on them, unsigned but waiting, and in the margin of one page was Cassandra's neat handwriting. File after she breaks. My breath caught, fury burning through me. So hot I nearly tore the papers to shreds, but I forced myself to remain calm, sliding everything back exactly as I found it before returning to the party with a smile that must have looked grotesque stretched across my face. That night after the last guest left, and Cassandra whispered something into Victor's ear before kissing him far too close to his mouth. For an instant, I retreated to my bedroom, every fiber of me vibrating with rage, but also with clarity. I could no longer just gather evidence. I had to strike back quietly, carefully, so that when I finally revealed their betrayal, it would destroy them both beyond repair. The first step was isolation. I began confiding less, pulling away emotionally in ways Victor barely noticed because he was too busy with his schemes, but to outsiders, I made it seem like I was fragile, overly dependent, painting the portrait they wanted the world to believe, except mine was crafted with precision, a performance to lull them into complacency. But the deeper I slipped into this charade, the stranger the house became, doors locking themselves, mirrors fogging when there was no steam, whispers echoing through the vents, and voices I almost recognized. One night, while showering, I saw words scrawled across the fogged glass. "Get out before they end you." My scream rattled through the bathroom. But when I wiped the glass, the words were gone, leaving me to question if I was losing my mind or if someone else had already taken notice of Victor and Cassandra's plan. Sleep became impossible, and when I did drift off, I dreamed of drowning, my body sinking into dark water, while Victor and Cassandra watched from the shore, holding hands, their laughter carrying over the waves. One morning, bleary-eyed, I confronted Victor casually about Cassandra, not accusing but teasing, asking if he trusted her too much. He froze just for a moment, his eyes darkening before he forced a laugh, and in that flicker of hesitation, I saw confirmation. Yes, he trusted her more than me, maybe even loved her, but it wasn't about romance. It was about power, ambition, greed. Days bled into weeks, and then came the night that solidified everything. The night I followed Cassandra after she left Victor's office late. I trailed her car through winding streets until she pulled into an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, and what I saw through the cracked, dirty windows made my blood run cold. Victor and Cassandra with 2 men. I didn't recognize spreading documents across a table discussing accounts, offshore transfers, money laundering, all tied to Victor's company. But then I heard my name, my entire body freezing as Cassandra said, "Once Aurora's out of the picture, everything falls into place." One of the men asked, "And what if she doesn't break?" Cassandra smiled, her face lit by a single overhead bulb, and replied, "Then we'll make sure she does." My heart pounded so loud I feared they would hear it, and I stumbled back, almost tripping over debris as I ran into the night, breath ragged terror clawing at me, because I finally understood they weren't just planning to erase me. Emotionally, they were planning something physical, something final. I returned home shaken, every shadow in the penthouse feeling like a threat, every creak in the floorboards like a warning, but I knew I couldn't run, not yet, not without exposing them first. I started recording everything, conversations, whispers through walls, even the strange noises at night, compiling a secret archive that I hid in a safe they didn't know existed. But paranoia grew like a living thing inside me, because one evening when I went to add a new recording, the safe was already unlocked, the files disturbed. And lying on top was a single slip of paper in Cassandra's handwriting. "We see you." My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the note, and for the first time, true despair clawed at me, because this meant they were already inside my defenses, already watching every move I made. And as I looked around the room, my breath came shallow and broken with the sickening realization that I wasn't alone. Somewhere in the shadows of that house, someone was watching me right then, waiting for me to turn around. The sense of being watched never left me, not even for a second. Every shadow in the penthouse felt alive, every footstep, every whisper of wind against the windows made my skin crawl, and yet I could not afford panic, not when Victor and Cassandra had shown they were capable of anything. So I became something else entirely, a predator disguised as prey, carefully plotting while hiding in plain sight, smiling at Victor's casual touches, laughing at Cassandra's forced sweetness, all the while feeding their illusion that I was weakening, fragile, easily broken. I started leaving small traps, subtle psychological breadcrumbs to test their reactions: an unsecured phone in the living room, a hidden camera in the study. But what I learned was horrifying. They had eyes everywhere, and it wasn't just Victor and Cassandra anymore. I began noticing unfamiliar faces in the background of my security footage, strangers whose presence I hadn't authorized, people who vanished whenever I tried to confront them. And that's when it became clear this wasn't only about betrayal. It was about control, obsession, and a desire to erase me from existence. I took precautions, changed locks, secured safes, encrypted files, but my paranoia wasn't paranoia, it was survival instinct. And one evening, as I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, I found a note taped to the fridge. "We know everything, Aurora. Stop digging or it will get ugly." My hands trembled as I read the words, but instead of fear, a cold, hard resolve settled over me. They thought they could intimidate me, manipulate me, and erase me from the world, but I had already seen too much, and now I had nothing to lose. I began assembling my evidence, meticulously cataloging every email, every secret meeting, every whispered plan, preparing a dossier that could destroy them both legally, financially, and socially. But the thought of nearly exposing them was no longer enough. The betrayal cut too deep, the psychological scars too raw, and a darker desire took root. Revenge, personal, intimate, calculated. I started watching Cassandra more closely, noting her routines, weaknesses, the way she underestimated me, believing my fragile act, believing my compliance, and I discovered her vulnerability, pride, obsession with appearances, and above all a craving to dominate and humiliate that could be used against her. One night I slipped into her favorite boutique under the pretense of shopping, leaving subtle marks, tiny fingerprints on objects, setting up cameras where no one would think to look, learning her movements, habits, and the patterns of her deception, all while Victor remained oblivious, too confident in the illusion that I was nothing but a trembling, broken wife. But the most chilling revelation came when I accessed one of Victor's private drives, hidden in plain sight under the guise of accounting files. Photos of me taken from the shadows over months, detailing my life, my routines, even my sleeping patterns, proving they had planned this betrayal long before I had any inkling, long before I could even comprehend the depth of their scheme. Rage and horror collided inside me, but I forced it into strategy, devising ways to use their own obsession against them. I began planting doubts, subtle manipulations, emails I sent from hidden accounts suggesting infidelity on Cassandra's part, text messages hinting at Victor's betrayal, creating cracks in their partnership, all the while maintaining the perfect facade of the helpless, compliant wife. And then the moment of escalation came. Victor had scheduled a private meeting with Cassandra in the penthouse office late at night, expecting privacy, expecting silence. Expecting me to remain in my room where I belonged. Instead, I followed hidden in the shadows, every step measured, my heart pounding, my mind focused entirely on the moment. When I would turn the tables, when the predator would become the prey. I watched them, Victor laughing, Cassandra leaning close, whispering conspiratorial words, unaware of the cameras. I had set up in advance the devices recording every movement, every expression, every word that would be used to shatter their perfect facade. But just as I prepared to reveal myself, to step into the light and confront them with undeniable proof of their crimes, something shifted, a sound, a movement behind me. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make me freeze mid-step. And then I realized, with blood running cold down my spine, that I wasn't alone in the office shadows. Someone else had been following me, tracking me, perhaps even manipulating my moves, someone who had been aware of my preparations all along. My heart hammered as I ducked behind the desk, knife in hand, listening to the slow, deliberate steps drawing closer, and I knew that everything I had built, the careful surveillance, the traps, the manipulations, was at risk of unraveling in an instant, because this new presence was unpredictable, and I had no idea whether they were ally or enemy, friend or another layer of betrayal. In that moment, the penthouse felt like a cage, the walls closing and the shadows stretching, and I realized that while Victor and Cassandra had underestimated me, I had also underestimated the scope of danger, the depth of deception, and the horrifying possibility that my fight for survival was far more complicated than I could have imagined. The footsteps paused just beyond the desk, and then a whisper cut through the darkness, familiar and icy. "Aurora, you shouldn't have come here alone." My pulse spiked, my grip on the knife tightened, and as I peeked through the shadows, my worst nightmare came into focus. A figure emerging from the darkness, someone I had never suspected, someone whose allegiance was unknown, and the chilling realization struck me that my carefully orchestrated plan, my meticulous revenge strategy, was about to collide with an even greater, more dangerous force, one that could destroy everything I had fought to protect. And I knew with terrifying clarity that my nightmare was far from over, and what happened next would change the game entirely. The figure stepped fully into the dim light of the office, and my heart froze. Recognition slammed into me like a freight train. It was not a stranger, not one of Victor's hired men, but Madeline, Victor's estranged sister, a woman I had met only a handful of times at family gatherings, someone whose smile always seemed too sharp, too calculating, whose eyes always watched far too closely, as though measuring me, judging me, cataloging my weaknesses. She regarded me with an unsettling calm, her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and in that instant I understood the full terrifying scope of the conspiracy. Victor, Cassandra, and now Madeline, a triad of deceit, ambition, and manipulation that had woven a web so complex that even I had underestimated it. But fury overpowered fear. I had already come too far, had cataloged months of betrayals, evidence, and secrets, and I wasn't about to allow anyone, family or otherwise, to erase me. I lunged forward with the knife I had concealed beneath my coat, and Madeline froze, startled just for a heartbeat before a wicked smirk spread across her face. "Bold," she whispered, almost admiringly, but reckless. I realized then that confrontation alone wouldn't win me this fight. Every step, every breath, every move had to be calculated, surgical, deadly precise, using the shadows, the element of surprise. I maneuvered around the office, pushing Victor toward the room's far side without giving them a chance to react, planting subtle but devastating sabotages as I went, overriding cameras, cutting wires, ensuring that when the chaos began, no one would have the upper hand except me. Victor tried to reason, his voice smooth but laced with panic. "Aurora, listen, you don't understand." But I did understand. I understood greed, lust, obsession, betrayal, and I understood survival. Cassandra lunged at me, the office chair she grabbed serving as both shield and weapon, but I had anticipated this, a swift pivot, a feint, and she crashed against the desk. Stunned in the confusion, I pressed a button I had secretly installed days earlier, a remote that triggered a silent alarm, alerting authorities and revealing a trail of their illicit activities. Papers flew, computers sparked, alarms hummed, and the penthouse transformed into a cage where their own schemes suffocated them. Madeline's eyes widened in disbelief as the realization dawned that I had not only anticipated their plan, but I had also orchestrated an elaborate counterattack that would expose their crimes to the world. Victor's confident facade cracked, revealing the raw, vulnerable man behind the mask, and Cassandra's face twisted in fury and terror. I cornered them both, my voice low, cold, and unwavering. "You underestimated me, you assumed I was fragile, naive, powerless, but every step you took, every secret you shared. I was watching, learning, preparing. The room felt electric with tension, every second stretched each heartbeat. A countdown to their reckoning, and then as the police sirens neared, flashing blue and red through the office windows, I watched them break, not just physically but psychologically, because betrayal cuts deeper than any blade, and the humiliation, the exposure and the collapse of their meticulously constructed lives was sweeter than revenge itself. They were led away, their protest fading into the night, while I stood alone in the penthouse, surrounded by the wreckage of their plans, my heart still racing but my mind clear. I finally allowed myself to exhale, the tension in my shoulders dissolving slowly. I knew this was the end of their reign over my life. They had underestimated me, but I had survived, and in surviving I had reclaimed everything they sought to take. My dignity, my power, my control. As the night settled over the city, quiet and still, I walked through the penthouse, touching the surfaces that had once been symbols of manipulation and betrayal, now silent witnesses. To my triumph, I had been tested, hunted, and cornered, but I had emerged victorious. The shadows of that nightmare would linger, but I had proven that even in the face of the darkest conspiracies, resilience, intelligence, and the unyielding will to survive can turn the predator into prey. And as I looked out over the city lights from the floor-to-ceiling windows, a calm resolve enveloped me. Aurora Hale was no longer a victim. I was the architect of my own destiny, and nothing, no betrayal, no deceit, no twisted alliance could ever take that from me. Thanks for watching and listening to my story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more written and edited by Dark Life Side Diaries.